I am Peyton Sullivan. I just buried my grandmother, Margaret Ellis. She was 78 years old, and we said goodbye to her today at a small cemetery on the outskirts of Seattle. At the funeral, as people were leaving the graveside, her lawyer, Henry Caldwell, pulled me aside. He didn't say much at first. He just leaned in close and whispered, "Your grandmother didn't die naturally, Peyton. If you want the truth, come to my office after everyone leaves. But whatever you do, don't tell your parents or your brother. You could be in danger." He didn't wait for me to answer. He just walked away, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding. I didn't know what to think, but something in his voice made me follow him. I waited until the last car left the cemetery, then I drove straight to his office. When I arrived, the building was dark except for one light in the lobby. And there, standing in the shadows by the door, was a man I had never seen before. He had the kind of eyes that looked like they had seen too much, and he was waiting for me. I froze. I didn't know who he was, but I knew everything was about to change. You ever felt that moment when you realize the people closest to you might be hiding something terrible? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. If you've ever had that gut feeling about family, hit like and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. After the graveside service ended, I lingered near the row of cars pretending to adjust my coat while watching Dad and Laura. They were standing a little apart from the others, close to the fresh mound of dirt. I couldn't hear everything, but their voices carried just enough on the damp air. Laura said something low and urgent, "If she went at the right time," and Dad muttered back, "The papers have to be done before anyone starts asking questions." The words hit me like a cold wind. I didn't catch the rest. They turned away when they saw me looking, but that fragment stuck in my head. It felt wrong, like a conversation that wasn't meant for me. I thought about the little things Grandma had done in the last few months. She kept important papers locked in a drawer she never used to lock before. She changed the lock on her bedroom door once, saying it was just in case, but she never explained what she meant. I had brushed it off as old age, but now those moments felt heavier. When we got back to the house in the quiet suburb outside Seattle, Dad called me into the living room. The room still smelled like the casseroles neighbors had brought over. He placed a thick stack of papers on the coffee table and sat down across from me. "These are for healthcare and financial power of attorney," he said. "It's so we can take care of things if you ever need help." Grandma would have wanted this. Laura stood beside him, arms folded, her smile soft. "She always talked about making sure you're protected, Peyton. Just sign where the tabs are. It's standard stuff." I picked up the top page. The language was dense, full of legal terms. There was a clause about substitute decision-making if I was deemed unable to manage my affairs. It didn't say anything about a confession, but the wording felt slippery, like it could mean more than they were letting on. I asked what it covered exactly. Dad waved it off. "Just routine. You don't have to read every line. We're family." I felt Laura's eyes on me the whole time. Her gaze wasn't warm, it was watchful, like she was measuring how much I suspected. I set the papers down and rubbed my eyes. "I'm exhausted from today. Can we do this tomorrow? I just need to rest." Dad nodded, but Laura's smile tightened. "Of course, sweetheart. Take your time." She touched my shoulder as I left the room, and her fingers felt cold. I went upstairs to my old bedroom, the one Grandma had kept ready for me whenever I visited. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall where she used to hang my childhood drawings. My mind kept replaying those words at the cemetery. "If she went at the right time." It didn't sound like grief. It sounded like calculation. I thought about Grandma's last few weeks. She had been tired, complaining about her heart racing at night. She stopped drinking her morning tea, as often saying it didn't taste right. I had visited her a week before she passed, and she had pulled me aside in the kitchen. "If anything happens to me, Peyton, promise you'll look after yourself. Don't let them rush you." She never said who they were, but now I wondered. Downstairs, I heard Dad and Laura talking in low voices again. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I locked my bedroom door, something I had never done before, and lay down. But sleep didn't come. Instead, I kept thinking about the papers on the table. I knew I couldn't sign them without understanding what they really meant. The next morning, I woke up early. Dad was already in the kitchen making coffee. Laura was there too, pouring a cup for me. She handed it over with a smile. "You must be tired. Drink this, it'll help." I took the cup, but didn't sip. I set it on the counter and said I needed to run an errand. Dad asked what kind. I told him I wanted to check on Grandma's house, make sure everything was okay. He hesitated, then nodded. Laura watched me leave, and I felt her eyes on my back the whole way to the door. I drove to Grandma's place, the small house she had lived in for 40 years. It was empty now, the furniture still in place, the air stale. I walked through the rooms, touching the things she had loved: the teapot on the stove, the photo albums on the shelf. In her bedroom, I found the drawer she used to keep locked. The lock was still there, but the key was in the same spot she always hid it, under the loose floorboard near the bed. Inside the drawer were bank statements, insurance papers, and a small notebook. I opened it. The pages were filled with her neat handwriting. She had written dates and notes. Tea tasted bitter again. Heart racing after breakfast. Laura insisted on making it today. And then toward the end, I don't feel safe. If I go, suddenly check the tea. And protect Peyton. My hands shook as I read. I didn't know what it all meant yet, but I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I slipped out of the house that night without turning on any lights. The driveway was quiet, and I took Grandma's old key from the hook by the door where she always left it. The drive to Henry Caldwell's office wasn't far, just 20 minutes through the empty streets of the suburb. The building was dark when I arrived, but a single lamp glowed in the lobby window. I parked and walked up to the door. It opened before I knocked. Henry led me inside without a word, straight to his office at the back. The man from earlier was already there, sitting in one of the leather chairs. Henry closed the door and said, "This is Marcus Reed. Your grandmother hired him a few months ago." Marcus nodded but didn't smile. He looked like someone who had spent too many nights waiting for answers. "She came to me because she was worried about something in her daily routine," he said. "She drank herbal tea every morning, and she started noticing it tasted off. She didn't want to accuse anyone, so she asked me to check it quietly. She was afraid of breaking up the family if she was wrong." He opened a folder on the desk and slid a report toward me. It was a lab summary from a private testing service. The page listed compounds in the sample she had sent. Most were normal herbs, but there was one line highlighted: "Unidentified substance detected, not consistent with standard herbal composition. Further analysis recommended." It wasn't a full conclusion, nothing definitive, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. I stared at the paper. "This doesn't mean anything yet," I said. "It could be nothing." Marcus leaned forward. "Your grandmother thought it was something. She told me if anything happened to her suddenly, I should show this to you. She said you were the only one she trusted to look into it." I shook my head. "My dad loved her. He couldn't." Henry put a hand on my shoulder. "She didn't accuse him directly. She just wanted to be sure. That's why she kept it from the police. She didn't want a big investigation tearing the family apart." I felt the room get smaller. My mind raced back to the cemetery, to those half-heard words from Dad and Laura, to the way Laura had watched me all evening. I thought about Grandma's face in her last weeks, pale, tired, but still trying to smile when I visited. She had hugged me tighter than usual, like she was saying goodbye. Marcus closed the folder. "We don't have proof yet, but she wanted you to know. If you decide to dig deeper, I'll help. If not, walk away now." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to run back home and pretend none of this was real, but another part, the part that remembered Grandma's quiet warnings, knew I couldn't. I looked at Marcus. What do we do next? He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me like he was waiting for me to decide how far I was willing to go. I sat there in the quiet office, the lamp casting long shadows across the desk. Marcus waited, patient but not pushing. Henry stood by the window, arms folded, watching the street outside. The rain had started again, tapping against the glass. I thought about Grandma's kitchen, the way she used to pour tea into her favorite cup, the one with the chipped handle. She always said it brought good luck. Now it felt like everything she touched was tainted. I finally spoke. Show me the sample she sent you. Marcus reached into his bag and pulled out a small sealed bag. Inside was a plastic vial with a few tea leaves and a powdery residue. She collected this from her last batch, he said. The lab found the anomaly, but they need more time for full testing. She didn't want to wait. I took the bag, turning it over in my hands. The leaves looked ordinary, but knowing where they came from made my skin crawl. She really believed this was happening to her. She did, Marcus said. She wrote it all down. Dates, times, how she felt after each cup. She was methodical. That's why she hired me, to protect you if she couldn't. Henry cleared his throat. She left instructions for you, Peyton. If you want them, they're in the safe. But once you take them, there's no going back. I looked at the folder on the desk. The report stared back at me, its words cold and clinical. I thought about Dad, how he used to carry Grandma's groceries when she was tired, how he laughed at her jokes. Could that same man be hiding something this dark? The idea made me sick. But Laura's face flashed in my mind, her watchful eyes, her too perfect smile. And those words at the cemetery. They weren't about grief. They were about timing. I took a breath. I want to see what she left. Henry nodded and went to the safe in the corner. He spun the dial and pulled out a small envelope. My name was written on the front in Grandma's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a flash drive. The paper read, Peyton. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Trust Marcus. He knows the truth. The drive has recordings and notes. Don't let them take everything from you. Love, Grandma. I held the envelope tight. My hands were shaking. Marcus watched me. You ready for this? I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. Marcus handed me the notebook, and I opened it with careful fingers. The pages were filled with Grandma's familiar handwriting, neat, slightly slanted, the same way she used to write birthday cards. She hadn't named anyone directly. Instead, she used phrases that only made sense now. The one who pours the tea isn't the same person I trusted anymore. Each cup carries a new kind of ache. She described the symptoms in quiet detail: mornings when her hands trembled so much she could barely hold the cup, afternoons when her hair came out in clumps in the brush, nights when her heart raced like it was trying to escape her chest. She wrote about how she started saving small amounts of the tea leaves after each batch, hiding them in a tin under the sink. One entry read, "The taste changed again today. Bitter, almost metallic. I pretended to drink it all, but I poured some into a vial when no one was looking." She mentioned sending samples to Marcus, asking him to test them privately. I can't go to the authorities yet. Family is fragile. If I'm wrong, I'll lose everything. Toward the end, the writing grew shakier. They want the house and the money, Peyton. Don't let them take you too. You're the only one left who might see through it. She didn't say who they were, but the meaning was clear. She ended with a single line, "If I leave suddenly, promise you'll look after yourself. And Ethan. He doesn't know." I closed the notebook, my throat tight. She was protecting us, I said. Even when she was sick. Marcus nodded. She was. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't want to believe it was someone close. That's why she kept it quiet. He explained what he had pieced together. Dad had made some bad investments a few years back. Real estate deals that fell through. Laura had pushed him to borrow more, promising quick returns. The debt grew, and Grandma was the only one who knew the full extent. She had helped him before, quietly paying off smaller amounts. But this time, it was too much. She suspected Laura was manipulating the situation, encouraging Dad to take risks he couldn't afford. The house is worth a lot, Marcus said, and her insurance policy names your dad as beneficiary with you and Ethan next in line. If something happened to her, and then to you... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I thought about Ethan. He was only 28, still figuring out his life. Dad and Laura had been keeping him out of family discussions about the will. They told him it was adult stuff, but I had seen the way he looked at them, confused, like he sensed something was off but couldn't put his finger on it. They're controlling him too, I said. He doesn't know about any of this. Marcus agreed. Your grandmother mentioned him. She was worried he'd get caught in the middle. I sat back in the chair, the notebook still in my lap. The weight of it felt heavier than it should. I pictured Grandma alone in her kitchen, pouring out tea she couldn't trust, writing these words in secret. She had carried all of this by herself to protect us. I looked at Marcus. What if we can prove it? He leaned forward. We need more than a notebook and a partial lab report. We need to catch them in the act, or at least get solid evidence. But it's risky. If they suspect you're onto them, they'll move faster. I knew what he meant. If Dad and Laura thought I was a threat, they might try to silence me the same way they had Grandma. I thought about the papers they wanted me to sign, the power of attorney that gave them control over everything. If I signed, I would be handing them the keys to my future. And Ethan's. I can't let that happen, I said. Not to Ethan. Not to Grandma's memory. Marcus studied me for a moment. Then we need a plan. But you have to be sure. Once we start, there's no turning back. I nodded. I was sure. He outlined the basics. I would go back home, act normal, pretend I was still grieving and trusting them. We would use the time to gather more evidence, maybe set up a way to monitor the house, or find out what else was in the papers. Grandma had left instructions for that too, hidden in the envelope. I opened the flash drive on Henry's computer. It had audio files. Grandma's voice, weak but clear, recording her symptoms day by day. One clip was from her last week. The tea was stronger today. I barely finished it. My chest hurts. Peyton, if you're hearing this, remember I love you. Don't let them win. Her voice broke at the end. I closed the file, tears burning my eyes. Henry watched me. She recorded those for you. She wanted you to know she fought. I wiped my face. She did. And I'm going to finish what she started. Marcus stood up. Then let's get to work. I left the office with the notebook and the drive tucked in my bag. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy. I drove back home slowly, my mind racing. Dad and Laura would be waiting. I had to play my part perfectly. When I walked through the door, the house was quiet. Dad was in the living room flipping through channels. Laura was in the kitchen. She looked up when I entered. Everything okay, Peyton? I forced a small smile. Yeah, just needed some air. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on my bag for a second too long. I went upstairs and locked my door. Tomorrow I would start acting like nothing had changed, but inside, everything had. I walked back into the house with the notebook and drive hidden in my bag, trying to keep my face calm. Dad was in the living room scrolling on his phone. Laura came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked at me with that same careful smile. Find what you were looking for? Yeah, I said. Just needed to think. I sat down on the couch and took a deep breath. I've been thinking about the papers, I told them. I'll sign them. But first, let's do something for Grandma. I want us to have dinner tonight. Read through her draft will. Together talk about her. Remember the good times. It feels right. Dad looked surprised but nodded. That's a good idea, Peyton. She'd like that. Laura's eyes narrowed just a fraction. We can do that. What do you need? I suggested we make her favorite meal, roasted chicken with fresh herbs, the way she always did it. We should go to the big market downtown. They have the best fresh stuff. I'll come with you. Dad agreed right away. Laura hesitated. It's a bit far. We could just go to the local store. No, I said. Grandma always said fresh makes the difference. Please, let's do it right. They exchanged a quick look. Dad shrugged. Fine. Let's go now. We drove to the market in downtown Seattle, the big one with the wide aisles and specialty sections. It was about 40 minutes from the house. Laura sat in the front, glancing back at me now and then. I pretended not to notice. Once inside, I took my time. I walked slowly through the produce section, picking up bunches of rosemary and thyme, smelling each one. This one smells better, I said, holding up a bundle. Laura sighed but said nothing. I asked the clerk about the best herbs for roasting, then moved to the meat counter. I asked questions about the chicken, organic or free range, how long to cook it. The clerk talked for 10 minutes. Laura tapped her foot. I kept going. In the wine aisle, I picked up bottles, reading labels carefully. Grandma liked this Cabernet, I said. Do you think it's the right vintage? Dad nodded absently. Laura checked her watch. We should head back soon. Just a little longer, I said. I want this to be perfect. I stretched it out for almost 2 hours. Laura grew more impatient, her smile fading. Dad tried to hurry me along, but I kept finding new things to look at. By the time we left, the sky was dark. On the drive home, Laura was quiet. She kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. When we pulled into the driveway, she turned to me. You seem different today, Peyton. Everything okay? I smiled. Just trying to honor Grandma. She didn't look convinced. Inside, I went upstairs to my room. I checked the bag, everything was still there. I knew Marcus's team had only had a short window while we were gone. They'd managed to install cameras in the kitchen and one in the living room corner. It wasn't perfect, only 2 angles, but it was something. The risk was high. If Laura or Dad noticed anything out of place, it would be over. I sat on the bed, heart pounding. I had bought us time, but I could feel the tension building. Laura's eyes had followed me the whole trip, like she was trying to figure out what I knew. Dad seemed oblivious, but I wondered how much he really understood. I thought about Ethan. He had texted me earlier asking if I was okay. I hadn't replied yet. I didn't want to drag him into this until I was sure. But seeing how Dad and Laura kept him away from any family decisions made me worry. They were controlling him too, in their own way. I looked at the notebook again. Grandma's words stared back. Don't let them take you too. I wouldn't. Tomorrow, I would play along. But tonight I locked my door and tried to sleep. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I went downstairs and found Laura in the kitchen. She was making coffee. Dad was outside checking the mail. I sat at the table and said, I'm ready to sign the papers today, but let's make sure everything is clear first. I want to go over them together. Laura's face brightened. Of course. I'll get them. She left the room and came back with the stack. We spread them out on the table. I asked questions about each page, pretending to be confused. What does this part about substitute decision-making mean? I asked. It's just in case you're ever unable to handle things yourself, Laura said. We'd step in to help. I nodded slowly. Makes sense. I just want to be sure. Dad came in and sat down. We went through the documents line by line. I dragged it out, asking for explanations on every clause. Laura's patience thinned, but she answered. Dad seemed relieved that I was cooperating. When we finished, I signed where they pointed. My hand shook a little, but I hid it. There, I said. It's done. Laura smiled. Thank you, Peyton. This will make things easier. I stood up. I'm going to rest now. See you later. I went back to my room. The cameras were in place. The papers were signed. Now all I had to do was wait for them to make their next move. I woke up early, the house still quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I stayed in bed for a few minutes, breathing slowly, getting my face ready. When I finally went down to the kitchen, Dad was already gone, probably out running errands. Laura was there rinsing dishes from last night. She looked up when I entered. "Morning, Peyton. You look tired." "I am," I said, rubbing my eyes. "I didn't sleep well. Grandma's been on my mind." She nodded, her expression sympathetic. "That's normal. Want some tea? I can make her favorite herbal blend." I sat at the table. "Yes, please. Just like she used to make it." Laura turned to the stove. She filled the kettle and set it on the burner. I watched her back as she reached for the tin of loose tea leaves. The kettle clicked as it heated. She moved slowly, like she was trying to be careful. I pretended to check my phone, but my eyes stayed on her. When the kettle whistled, she poured the water over the leaves in the teapot. Then she stepped to the side, out of my direct line of sight, near the counter where the spice rack was. I heard a faint clink, something small being opened. I stood up quietly and walked toward the sink, pretending to get a glass of water. As I passed the counter, I saw her. She had a small glass vial in her hand, tipping a pinch of white powder into the teapot. Her movements were quick, practiced. My heart slammed against my ribs. I froze for a second, then kept walking to the sink. She didn't notice me behind her. I filled the glass, took a sip, and went back to the table. Laura turned with the teapot and 2 cups. She poured one for me first. "Here you go," she said, setting it in front of me. "Careful, it's hot." I wrapped my hands around the cup. The steam rose, carrying the familiar herbal scent. I lifted it to my lips, but my hand shook. I lowered it again. "Sorry," I said. "I'm still clumsy this morning." I set the cup down too fast. It tipped over, tea spilling across the table and onto the floor. Laura jumped back. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," I said, jumping up. "I'm such a mess. Can you make another one? Please, I really need it." Laura stared at the spill for a moment. Her jaw tightened, but she forced a smile. "Of course. Let me clean this up first." She grabbed a towel and wiped the table. I helped, my hands trembling for real now. She refilled the kettle and started over. This time I stayed closer, watching every move. She reached for the vial again when she thought I wasn't looking. The powder went in, just a small amount, but enough. She poured the second cup and handed it to me. "Try this one." I took it. My fingers shook so badly the tea sloshed. I brought it to my mouth close enough that the heat touched my lips. For a second I thought I might actually drink it just to test if she would stop me, but I didn't. I set it down slowly. "Thanks, Laura," I said. "I'll sip it in a bit." She watched me for a long moment. "You sure you're okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." I sat back down. The cup steamed in front of me. I knew Marcus was watching through the camera in the kitchen corner. But the angle was limited, one clear view of the counter, but not perfect. If she had been faster, or if I hadn't stepped in, the evidence might not have been enough. The risk felt too high. One wrong move and everything could fall apart. Laura went back to the sink, rinsing the teapot. I stared at the cup. The tea looked innocent, but I knew better now. My hands were still shaking. I thought about Grandma, how many times she had sat at this same table drinking what she didn't trust. I needed to end this soon. I stood up and walked to the living room. Dad was back, sitting on the couch. He looked up. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just having some tea." He nodded and went back to his phone. I sat down across from him. Laura came in a minute later, carrying her own cup. She sat next to Dad. "You should drink it before it gets cold," she said. I picked up the cup again. My hand trembled. I brought it close, pretending to blow on it. Then I set it down. "Actually, I think I'll wait a bit. My stomach's not great." Laura's smile tightened. "Suit yourself." I stayed there for a while, talking about nothing, weather, the neighbors, anything to fill the silence. Dad seemed relaxed. Laura kept glancing at my cup. I knew she was waiting for me to drink it. The camera captured it all, but the angle wasn't ideal. Marcus had warned me about that. If the powder wasn't visible clearly, it might not hold up. I had to make sure they did it again, or find a way to get better evidence. I thought about Ethan. He was upstairs, probably still sleeping. I hadn't seen him since last night. I wondered if he knew anything. Dad and Laura had kept him out of everything, told him the will was private. But he was part of this family too. I excused myself and went upstairs. Ethan's door was closed. I knocked softly. He opened it, looking sleepy. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just checking on you." He rubbed his eyes. "Mom and Dad are acting weird. They keep asking if I've talked to you about the papers." I nodded. "They're pushing me to sign stuff. I'm handling it." He frowned. "What stuff?" "Nothing important," I lied. "Just family things." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. "Let me know if you need help." I hugged him quickly. "I will." Back downstairs, Laura was waiting. "You should drink your tea," she said. "It'll help you relax." I picked it up again. This time, I pretended to take a sip. The liquid touched my lips, but I didn't swallow. I set it down. "Tastes a little off," I said. Laura's face changed just for a second. Then she smiled. "Maybe it's the new blend." I nodded. Maybe. I knew the camera had caught it. But the risk was still there. One more step, and I could end this. I stood up from the table, my hands steady now despite the pounding in my chest. The tea sat untouched in front of me. Laura watched me closely, her smile gone. Dad looked up from his phone, confused. Grandma knew everything I said. My voice clear. She left a notebook and samples. She knew what was happening. Laura's face went pale. Dad froze. "Peyton, what are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and opened the app Marcus had set up. The live feed from the kitchen camera appeared. I turned the screen toward them. "Watch this." The video showed Laura at the counter earlier, the vial in her hand, the white powder falling into the teapot. It was clear enough, the angle caught her movements perfectly. Laura's breath caught. Dad stared at the screen, color draining from his face. Laura stepped back. "That's not," I didn't. "Daniel, tell her it's not what it looks like." Dad didn't speak. He just kept staring at the video, his mouth open. I kept going. "She wrote it all down. The symptoms, the bitter taste, the way you both acted. She knew you wanted the house, the insurance, everything." Laura's eyes darted to Dad. "Daniel, say something." He finally looked at me. "Peyton?" "I didn't know. I swear." Laura laughed, a sharp, panicked sound. "He's lying. He planned it all. I just went along because he threatened me." Dad shook his head. "No." "Laura, stop. I didn't let them argue. The papers you had me sign, they weren't just power of attorney. They were an end-of-life directive giving you the right to make medical decisions for me if I was incapable. You wanted to declare me unfit, take control, and cut me out of the inheritance." Laura lunged for the phone. "Turn that off." I pulled it back. "It's too late. The footage is already saved, and the police are watching right now." At that moment, the front and back doors burst open. Officers in uniforms rushed in, guns drawn. Police hands where we can see them. Laura screamed and dropped to the floor, hands over her head. Dad raised his arms slowly, eyes wide. Two officers cuffed Laura first. She kept shouting, "It was him. He made me do it." Dad didn't resist. He just looked at me, broken. "Peyton, I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Ethan came running down the stairs, hair messy from sleep. He stopped at the bottom, staring at the chaos. "What's happening?" One officer held him back gently. "Stay here, son." Ethan looked at me. "Peyton, what's going on?" I walked over to him. "They hurt Grandma. They tried to hurt me too." His face crumpled. "No." Dad couldn't meet his eyes. The officers read their rights. Laura kept blaming Dad, her voice shrill. Dad stayed silent, head down. As they led them out, Ethan grabbed my arm. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know anything. I believed him. He had been kept in the dark just like Grandma wanted to protect him. The house filled with police activity photos, evidence bag statements. Marcus arrived later coordinating with the detectives. He gave me a small nod. You did good. I didn't feel good. I felt empty. They took Dad and Laura away. Ethan sat with me on the couch while the officers worked. He cried quietly. I held his hand. When the last officer left, the house was silent again. Ethan looked at me. What happens now? I took a breath. We get through it. Together. But I can't stay here anymore. He nodded. I understand. I packed a bag that night. I left the house the next morning. I didn't look back. Months later, the courtroom in Seattle felt colder than the cemetery where we buried Grandma. The judge's voice echoed through the room as he read the sentence. Daniel Ellis received life imprisonment without parole for his role as the primary orchestrator. Laura received a reduced sentence due to less direct evidence and her cooperation with the investigation. The charges centered on causing harm leading to Grandma's death and conspiracy to harm me. The courtroom was quiet except for the soft sobs from a few relatives in the back. Ethan sat beside me, gripping my hand tightly. He hadn't spoken much since the arrest. I looked at Dad one last time as they led him away. He didn't look back. Laura glanced over her shoulder, her eyes red, but I turned away. There was nothing left to say. After the hearing, Ethan and I walked out together. The rain had stopped, leaving the sky gray and heavy. He stopped on the courthouse steps. Peyton? I'm sorry, I should have seen it. You didn't know, I said. None of us did. Grandma protected us both. He nodded slowly. What now? I took a breath. I'm moving to Portland. I need space. I'll keep the house. Grandma's house, but I can't live there anymore. Not with everything that happened. He looked down. Can we still talk? Not every day, but... Sometimes I hesitated. Then I nodded. Minimal contact. No visits. But yes, we can talk. You're my brother. That doesn't change. He hugged me tightly. Thank you. I drove to Grandma's house that afternoon. The keys felt heavy in my hand. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture she loved, the teapot on the stove, the photo albums on the shelf. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like a place that needed purpose again. I decided to turn it into a safe haven for women escaping domestic abuse. I worked with local organizations to set it up: bedrooms for short-term stays, counseling space in the living room, a garden out back, where they could sit and breathe. I used part of the inheritance to fund it. Grandma would have wanted that. She always said the house was meant to shelter people, not just hold memories. I moved to Portland a few weeks later. I found a small apartment near the river. It was simple, quiet. I started a new job at a nonprofit helping with financial planning for families in crisis. Every day felt a little easier than the last. I don't talk to Dad or Laura. The court ordered no contact and I didn't fight it. Ethan calls, sometimes short conversations about his life, his job, nothing deep. We're careful. We're trying. I still think about Grandma every day. She fought in silence to protect us. She left the clues, the notebook, the drive, because she believed I would find them. She was right. Greed can destroy a family. It can turn people you love into strangers. But the truth always finds a way out, even when it hurts the most. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away to protect yourself, to honor the ones who fought for you, and to build something better from the pieces left behind. I keep Grandma's teapot on my shelf. It reminds me some things are worth saving and some things are worth letting go.